Hey guys, welcome to the first of a three-part tutorial on how I've made a lot of the trees and similar types of vegetation in my CryEngine game so far. You can see them, just about all that I've included in this one scene here. So we definitely could use some work, but I'd say they're somewhat realistic, and hopefully it'll help you guys see errors in what I've done and help me improve. And hopefully this will also get you guys a jump start, so you don't have to spend hours and hours tweaking and trying to figure out what methods to use. So oh, one more thing. I'm going to link my IndieDB page. If you guys could check it out, it means a lot to me because it kind of keeps me motivated. I get to see when people are visiting and how much attention I'm getting, and keeps me, kind of pumped up to keep working on my game. Make some cool posts of places I've visited that kind of helped inspire my game. I'm gonna start a recruitment thread soon for people who are interested in joining the team. I got a trailer here, which you can also find on my YouTube channel. But let's get started. So, first thing is I use real world source material, and you guys I'm sure can find images on the internet. I'm going to share with you guys all these images I've taken, but I encourage all of you to get out there and whatever opportunity you get to get outside and away from the computer, I take advantage of in your game development. And also real world images are the best, especially chances are you're like me, you're basing the game off where you're from, or at least I am. So I go out into the woods and I take pictures of the trees that I'm going to include in my game. It also helps me get inspired and see how to make my vegetation realistic. But I think I already picked this one as the one I'm going to use. So we're making an oak tree. I need an oak tree for my game, a big old big one, like a 4-foot kind of diameter. I don't have one of those yet, except smaller ones. So by the time I'm done, I should have some, decent model, and you guys will too. So since we're starting from scratch, complete scratch, I'll explain. Generally speaking, the ideal image you want to start with is a small branch. You don't want to do tons and tons of leaves. It's going to be pretty hard for your Photoshop or Gimp to take out the background, which is what you're going to need to do. That's the first step. So if you have a really complex images and you need to select the foreground from the background, it's going to be very difficult. If you have 70 leaves, it's going to get a lot of the background included, and it's going to look very unrealistic when you export it to your engine. I'm just speaking from experience. So I typically try to do just 3 to 4 leaves tops, and it makes it a lot easier for the foreground selection tool. So that's the first thing we're going to use. So tools, selection tools, foreground selection. So we just loop around the general area. Also, I just use my sweatshirt, I'm sure you can notice, but ideally you would use a blank white, maybe black would work too, but a color that contrasts with what you're trying to select. But this should work fine. It's a pretty useful tool. It knows what to do. So you're going to strike across the thing you want to select. I believe it's selecting based on color. So that's its first guess, and it's not too bad. So I'm going to keep selecting the leaves. Okay. I missed the stem, but we can go back and get it later. Still pretty good. I'm going to try getting some of the stem, the bark. That's as good as you're going to get, pretty much. I wouldn't push it too much further. Kind of have to, from my experience, there's no real going back. There's only going forward. So once you get a pretty good selection, I just hit enter. And then I'm just going to Control X that. So cut that. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to paste it onto that layer. I'm just going to click out so it's on a floating layer right now, but it'll merge immediately with the new layer I just made. And now we can go back and select what we want. I really want to get hyper detail at this step. By the time you export it, by the time you make your final tree, it's going to be hundreds and hundreds of these patterns. So you do want to make sure there's no obvious errors, because those obvious errors can be repeated over and over. But at the same time, I wouldn't spend too much time trying to make it perfect, because a lot of details you're just going to get missed. Actually, I'll use foreground selection tools again. Oh, I'm using. Okay. So it's kind of touch and go. By the time you get to the end, you can see what maybe you missed. Am I? Yeah, that was. There we go. I was using the lasso tool by mistake. There we go. I'll select that stem that got missed. That didn't really help. I'll just have to use the lasso tool again, I guess. I can also try fuzzy select, but I'm just going to be quick and dirty. Just grab it. I'm going to move on. I don't even want this little edge here. Let's cut across. Go back to my active layer. Pretty good. I do like having these actually touch the branch. By the way, as you can tell, they're not touching, and that's because it is late fall and there's no real trees with branches on them. So I kind of had to simulate a tree with a branch and just grab some leaves off the ground. It's kind of funny because a lot of my modeling is kind of seasonal based. So if I want to do a big colorful tree, I have to get it when it's in its prime in fall. So once I miss that window, I can pretty much have to wait a whole year before I get another chance. So I tend to take a bunch of pictures and then handle modeling later on. So I'll have a bunch of time in winter when I'm stuck inside. Ah, shit. Paste it back so it's actually connecting. Looks pretty good. I'm going to use the smudge tool now just to kind of pull this over. It doesn't have to be perfect at this point. If I have to, I can go back at the very end and then tweak this stuff, but just trying to get a good start, a solid effort, and then get to the final steps. I'm gonna remove that twig. Just gonna take the little piece off the leaf there. Doesn't really matter. Kind of the more chewed up the vegetation or the leaves, I find the better it looks because if they're big, it kind of just looks like a big flat object in a game engine. It doesn't kind of have that nice appeal. It kind of looks like a big flat 2D image, which you don't really want. So little bits of holes, stuff like that, makes them look a lot nicer, I find. So I just leave them in. I don't really care. Yeah, it's a little actually chopped off on the. That looks fine for now. That'll do. Alright, so now we have our alpha background. So when we get to Blender or our game engine, that's going to be invisible, and all that's left is the branch. But we're actually going to take it one step further. First thing though, we're going to scale the image. It's way too big right now. We're scaled down to 1024. This is linked, which means it's going to be proportional. So now it's going to be a lot easier to work with when we're in Blender. It's not going to be as large a file. It should be a lot faster. So we're going to export it. If you work with CryEngine, you're going to export it as a TIFF file just for future use. CryEngine uses TIFF files and converts them from there. Let's do branch sample 2. It's just a previous file there. Export. And next step is we're going to make the sprite for a larger branch in Blender. Alright, now we are in Blender, and this is the latest version. It's just we're starting from scratch in the default kind of load up. So if you guys have any issues, setting up the screen and whatnot, you'll see that. So first thing, create a new window, and I set this one to UV editor, and we will first just delete everything in the scene. A to select all. And we're going to use this weird little, I guess, add-on that you have to install yourself. I haven't done it in a while, but I believe you just go to add-ons. Then it is called Sapling itself, so I'll do that now. I don't think it'll recognize it. Let's see, Shift A. It's a curve. Oh no, it's still there. So yeah, it is enabled. You'll see it in underneath the curve setting, and you can do add tree, and it's going to bring up all these parameters here. And the reason why this is actually a pretty cool add-on. I tried making trees using this add-on alone, and it will make them, very realistic and very nice in Blender. But it's gonna make them very high poly, and it just won't be high performance for a game engine. For whatever reason, I just couldn't get it to make realistic trees at a reasonable poly count. It just doesn't seem to do a good job at that. But we're gonna use it to make a sprite of a bigger branch, and then take an image of that branch in Blender, and then that will become our sprite in game. So instead of having a branch, and I'll show you later on, instead of having a branch that's thousands of polys, we'll have one that's just a 2D image, and it'll pretty much look the same, and it's going to save the game engine tons and tons of effort and frame rate, because just a 2D image is much easier to load and handle than a very complicated 3D image or 3D model. So bevel is going to allow us to see it in 3D. Branch splitting, 3 levels. So already you can see what I mean. Tons of polygons already. Shit, like, looks very real so far though, even without the leaves. So we only want to have one of these, or just a few of them really, to work with. So all these extra branches we're gonna get rid of. Branch growth, curvature, branch splitting, I guess it was. Yeah, so we're going to crank down the number of them. I'll just leave 2. We only really need 1. Curvature. Since I'm making my own tree, I'm kind of invested as much as you guys are, so I'm going to take a little extra time, try to screw around with the bending and all that so it looks realistic. Yeah, I don't like how they're a little too vertical. Let's see if I can. It's pretty good. I think there's a little variation that I want to get rid of. I don't know why so many are growing up. Kind of want them all to tilt down a little bit. I always delete the ones that I think are a little too far up later on. Let's see. I don't really like that. Shit. Sorry about that, guys. This sapling add-on can be a little unforgiving, so if you kind of make a mistake or hit escape or click out of it, it just kind of ends it for you. So you actually export a preset if you get a chance. You can export it so that way you can go back and not have to start from scratch. But because I update, I guess, the newest Blender, all my exports seem to be missing, or I have to dig around where I put them. So I'm starting from scratch too. So pretty much back to where we started. Let's go to leaves. We're gonna do rectangular. Show them. Way too many. Try, I don't want to say decimal. And then size. Kind of wish I had my presets right now, but you kind of tweak around. I go a lot bigger than this. I go about that size because we're trying to make like a solid 6 foot branch coming off of. Well, maybe not actually. Scale it down a little bit. Keeping it to real life scale. Our decrease the X scale. Our image seems to be about, I don't know, about 1.5 feet. So in relation to a whole 6 foot branch, a little bit bigger. For you can always scale down the image and then go back. You can't really scale it up, if that makes sense. So it's easier if you do make mistakes. It's a lot easier to just go back into Gimp and scale it down, and then it'll still appear on these leaves here, but smaller. So if you make them a little extra big, that's not an issue. If you make them a little bit small, then you kind of have to start over. So I tend to make them a little extra big. I'm going to decrease the number even further, so it's a little less cluttered. That's pretty good. I tend to start manually tweaking it anyway, so I'm going to start off lower. Alright, let's go with that. I'm pretty sure once I click out, or click it, oh no, I think they updated that. But now, we can actually start working with it. I believe it's still a wire though, or it's not an actual mesh. These are meshes, these are not. I might convert that. Here it is. Mesh from curve. Alright. Now, there we go. A lot nicer. And right now I'm also in ISO mode. Or no, perspective. Now I want to go to ortho. So I hit 5 on the numpad. So these, here's the UV map, or UV map editor, and we're going to open up our old oak tree, or large oak tree, I should say. There we go. Sample 2. And, oh, once you're on shading, so you hit N, texture solid, and shading. Then we go to top view. See how it's oriented real quick. R90 to rotate. R180. No. That seems to make the most sense. Seems what the Blender has it right. I'm just trying to figure out how I'm supposed to orient the image. It puts the leaves in a correct way. You don't have to worry about it being completely off or anything like that. You just gotta kind of rotate and scale it till it fits. There we go. Starting to look kind of good. But so we still need to texture the tree itself. So I'm gonna go back into UV editor. Excuse me, Gimp. I'm gonna go back into Gimp so we can put it into our UV editor. But we have the leaves all set up and we have a pretty good template so far. So again, back to our source. We're gonna get, you should have a bark image. That's pretty much all you need is an image of the leaves, just a small chunk, and obviously take multiple because you're gonna have issues with different types, and then images of the trunk of the tree. And you only need a solid 6-8 foot section to really get it. After that, you're just repeating it. It looks fairly realistic once you have that much included. Sure. So obviously this isn't perfect to begin with, but we can kind of do a lot of tricks in Gimp to help us make a nice, we want a nice rectangular 2D image by the time we're done. And we're just going to have that image get repeated over and over. And you won't even notice that's being repeated, generally speaking. I think it looks very nice by the time it's done. So, actually, I think I'm going to start by using the perspective tool. As you can see, well, obviously, a tree kind of grows like that, but also I'm standing at the base, and it's getting narrower due to just the angle of the image. So I'm going to use, I think it's transform tools, transform tools, perspective. And I want it to be a nice rectangle anyways when I'm done, so having a nice kind of squared up tree, even though I'm distorting it digitally, it looks real by the time it's done. Okay, it's kind of funny how you can't even notice it so far. Even better, so it's starting to look easier and easier for me to work with. I just started doing texture mapping for my characters, where you can take multiple angles of an image and then kind of sew them together seamlessly, and it looks very real. I haven't figured out how to use it for trees just yet, or I haven't applied it. I'm still kind of figuring it out for characters and people and clothes, but I'm sure there's much more realistic ways of doing this. This is kind of a crude way, but it's worked fairly well for me so far, so hopefully this will at least let you guys get started and then develop better techniques with time. So we're just getting a big rectangular chunk out of it. Scaling's a little off. I think it was a little too aggressive for that perspective tool. Scale at the bottom. All right, now it should be pretty reasonable. I don't like it, you know, obviously I distorted the image a bit, but I don't want it to be super noticeable. We're going to notice, you know, the bark looks a lot smaller on one end and a lot bigger on another. That looks very unrealistic, I feel. So now it seems to be somewhat decent. I'm trying to get a nice long section of it because it's going to be repeated. So the bigger of a chunk, the less it's noticeable. Image auto crop. So cool. And now here's my favorite tool. I wish I knew this when I was doing terrain textures. If you're painting terrain, this is the most useful tool ever. Make seamless. Did a pretty good job on the first try, but as you can see, so when we repeat it and we wrap it around the entire tree, it's gonna look fairly realistic. It's gonna, you're not gonna notice the seams too much. You're not gonna notice the repetition too much. just to quickly show you. This is how I go and check to make sure the seamless tool did a pretty good job. It's kind of touch and go sometimes. Yeah, so if you can just look at this chunk right here. Oh crap. This is how our tree's gonna look. Just getting repeated over and over vertically. It's gonna get wrapped around. And you don't really notice that it's being repeated. It's kind of done in such a way that your eye doesn't catch it. And then between the lighting and shading in the game, if I want to, I can go into this image and start adding my own little details with some of the paint tools. All those little factors make it pretty nice, and helps the player not notice that it's, you know, a 2D image that we made in Gimp. So we're going to quickly, well, we should export that. I'm going to do more work to this later on, but it's just what we're going to use to make our branch sprite. So bark. No, that's so simple. TIFF. This is just a really quick and dirty way of doing it, but it gets the job done. Get rid of things we don't really care about right here. Cool. Select all of the branch parts right there. We're gonna open up our bark file. I'm gonna export that. Just getting I got the story because the image is trying to adapt to the image, so I just project again. There we go. This is a really quick and dirty method, but you're not going to notice at all by the time it gets to the game. It's just kind of, yeah, it looks fairly decent in terms of the different colors, the different images. It looks kind of decent. Worried about the leaf actually orientation. Did I get it wrong? These look good. I think some of them are just facing weird angles. So this is where we start having to manually tweak things so it looks nice. Since we're using it for a different purpose than it's intended. We're using this so we can take a 2D image, and I take two of them. I take one vertical, it's gonna be our overhead image, and I take one from the profile from the side. So we're first gonna do the overhead one.
Standard things that help no more hindering.
Almost forgot, we're gonna have to add materials and textures to it so it can be rendered properly. So I'm just gonna call it leaves, and then we're gonna texture image movie. That's right. Open, use the same one. Map. Leaf UV. I'm really glad I'm making this tutorial actually, because there's a lot of weird tricks I figured out in the last year, literally hours and hours over the course of the year, just looking up tips about Blender, tips about rendering, that I wish I knew, and I know I'm almost forgetting it, but it's all coming back to me now. So I'm really glad I'm putting this up here, and it'll save you guys a bunch of time. Alpha, pretty sure I looked at 1, but this one, so material, you set the alpha, set the Z transparency, not mask, not ray trace. Set the Z. You're gonna get weird render issues. Set the alpha to 0. Leave this to 1, and then emit. I usually turn down a little, but that's gonna allow it so you don't have to add a lamp. The lamp just, when you add the lighting in, just kind of gives you weird shadows, and you don't want that. You want the game engine to do the shadows for you. So they're just gonna almost make it glow. It's gonna make it just illuminate itself. And we're gonna do the same thing. This one we don't have to do all the alpha stuff because it's not, doesn't have a background that needs to be removed like the leaves do. But we do need to make it emit its own light and tell it what UV map or what image to use. Using the bark. Emit, turn it down just a little. It tends to be a little bright at 1. And we're back. I just spent a few minutes mostly just deleting ones that looked awkward, going back, scaling, tweaking. This one still looks a little weird. Typically when you have ones that look particularly too big, that's when it looks unrealistic in game, because then it looks like a big kind of planar, not 3D real image. It starts looking like, you know, a big flat ugly thing. So I like small chunks of leaves, not big scaled up ones. So I'm gonna scale this one down. And already you can kind of see what I mean. Notice the more kind of little leaves and more gaps of space, the more realistic it looks. I spent a lot of time looking at Arma. If you guys play that game, Daisy, that one has awesome vegetation. It really feels like you're in the middle of the woods. You're gonna get lost. It's kind of cool. That really helped me kind of figure out what I was doing wrong and what I need to improve on. Cool. So it looks like a pretty good flat. Good enough for now. I'm going to delete that one real quick. How's that? Alright. I'm going to press forward. So now we're going to do our first image, which is going to be overhead. By the way, we can also go back and tweak it in Gimp after we take our first sprite. Still a few things I kind of want to tweak. I've honestly spent at least an hour doing this, but I want to make sure I get this tutorial up in time. This process I definitely say is pretty time consuming. So I'm going to add a camera, and it's automatically going to know, since I click 7, which is overhead, it's automatically going to orient itself to the overhead. And this is one trick you want to remember. There's a few tricks. One is I want to set the ortho shoot. Definitely set the transparent, because that way it's going to render the background as alpha, which we definitely want. Try to find where I can set the ortho as opposed to perspective. Here it is, ortho. So let's do, oh, also, now we're all set up to take our first image. So the camera's ready, everything should be good. I'm gonna hit F12, it's gonna render, and already nothing's perfect the first time. This is very much a guess and check kind of method. So the camera's a little bit off. I can change the dimensions actually, and oh well. So I'm going to make the Y larger. Cool, it looks a little bit better. A few things about just making branches realistic that I found. You want to have a nice long kind of extra chunk of the branch that's coming off from the larger branch. So I'm going to extend that and make it a little less, a little bit of a noticeable V. I don't like how these are coming out straight. It's kind of awkward. I want to bend them and make them look a little bit nicer. Some leaves are coming off at weird angles, but overall you get the idea. I'll probably take a break and spend some time fixing that, and then we'll continue. But this is key right here. So you can save the image. We have the alpha background. So this is going to be our sprite essentially. And then we will use that. We're going to make another, and then we'll use those to make the branches on our trees. And it's going to save us lots and lots of polygons. How many is it going to save? Well, in this scene, there's 654. So this is one branch of probably a few dozen. I say I usually use about 50 of these on a tree that I'm making. So if I have 50 of those, 50 times 654, it's a lot. What, 30,000 polygons? That's way too many. That's going to destroy your game. So this is going to save you probably 28,000. I keep my trees approximately at 2,000 polygons. That's about what's recommended, I think, for CryEngine. Most people don't try to go above that. If I could get it lower, I've seen guys do fantastic stuff with sprites and accurate modeling and do a lot lower than that. But for me, that's about the area I try to stick to, 1,500 to 2,500. That's the very maximum I'm willing to go. So we'll pick it up next time with modeling the tree in Blender and making use of these sprites. Thanks, guys.